And now, just because I can't help myself, a word about parliamentary democracy. There is an online petition got up by Nigel Farage and promoted by Elon Musk calling for an immediate general election in Britain. The idea is to topple what Musk calls our tyrannical police state. Now, this petition has got 2 million signatures, which sounds a lot, and you're going to hear more about it. So, first, almost every democratically elected government becomes unpopular at some time. If we could use petitions to force elections, almost no British governments since the war would have survived for long. A tough problem comes along. The government does something unpopular and bang. Thatcher out before she really got going. Blair out. Boris Johnson out. 2 million sounds a lot, but it's not compared to the 6.8 million who voted Tory in the summer, still less than 9.7 million who voted Labour. Second, if we were a petition or plebiscite democracy, then we would almost certainly have reversed Brexit. Would Nigel Farage, would Elon Musk be happy with that? But third, and most important of all, we have a parliamentary system. That means that every 4 or 5 years, the elected government has to offer itself again to the voters. And if we don't like them, we kick them vigorously out. But in the meantime, we let them get on with it. And assuming a workable majority, we have something called a stable government. And stable is useful. It's more useful than chaos, anarchy, or insurrections. It's parliamentary democracy. It isn't tyranny, and by and large, it's served us pretty well thus far. If we started to kick out governments with petitions, I don't know who would dance more with glee, Elon Musk or Vladimir Putin. On which note, let's talk about the Ukraine war again, which is as hot as ever. The Russians targeted Ukraine with nearly 500 Iranian-designed drones last week. A British national has, it seems, been captured. But here we are waiting to see what Vladimir Putin's threats following the use of British Storm Shadow missiles actually mean for us. In London, the Cabinet Minister, Pat McFadden, has been giving stark warnings about our vulnerability to cyber attacks, telling a NATO conference that Moscow is planning a wave of them to cause havoc on our critical infrastructure, which sounds very scary. But is it true? And do we not have adequate defences? And by the way, if we don't, what should ordinary folk be doing to prepare? There is, I think, literally nobody better equipped to try to answer these questions than Kieran Martin, the founding director of Britain's National Cybersecurity Centre, a former advisor on security and intelligence at the Cabinet Office, and before that a man who worked at GCHQ. He told me what kind of critical infrastructure could be at risk from these cyber attacks.
I think what Pat McFadden is saying is drawn on two things. One is lessons of the war in Ukraine, where there's been a significant cyber dimension. So even before the full-scale invasion of February 2022, but after the annexation of Crimea, you saw Russia literally turning the lights out in parts of Ukraine. It took them quite a long time to do this. These would be 2-year operations, 3-year operations, and the impact would be relatively limited. Power would go out for a few million people for a few hours, and this is a country that struggled with electricity supply. But you could see the sort of harassment they were doing in cyberspace. Now they're at full-scale war. They're using cyber for intelligence. They're using it to gather information on critical infrastructure. But frankly, if they want to take out the power grid, they'll tend to bomb it or fire missiles at it rather than do cyber attacks. What does it mean for us? Well, it means two things. One is a lot of geopolitical analysts are talking about this as a pre-war era. Now, they may be right, they may be wrong. I don't know. I suspect nobody knows for sure. But we have to guard against that sort of escalation. But even outside of that, what Russia has done, both through itself and through criminals that it harbours, is it's done a lot of spying. So if you look at, for example, if we are heading towards some post-Trump presidency endgame in Ukraine, there'll be, significant interest in Russia in finding out what the UK government thinks. There'll be interest in manipulating politics via cyber, and we've got used to that over the years. The criminals will be doing things that may not be as spectacular, if I can use that word, as taking out power grids, but they did a major attack on South London's hospitals earlier this year, which is a really painful disruption when you've got thousands of operations cancelled. Russia has also, and Pat McFadden used the word reckless, it has in the past undertaken cyber attacks on Ukraine that have gone beyond its control and affected businesses here and businesses all over the world, doing billions of pounds worth of damage. So those are the types of things we have to be on alert for. But I think some of the ways in which the warnings ahead of the speech about Russia turning off the lights in the UK are overdone, and that's not actually what the speech says.
That's really interesting, that last point, because I'm thinking of people at home sitting there wondering, should I stock up on candles and torches and all the rest of it? Should I prepare for the lights to go out? What's going to happen? Is my bank going to go down? Am I going to be unable to use my supermarket because of cyber attacks? Are these things a practical possibility, or are they really in the realms of fiction?
Depends which bit of that you mean, Andrew. So I think at the more extreme end of survivalist hoarding because of, sustained power outages and so forth, we're not in that space. And I don't think we're in that space anytime soon. As someone who lives in an area affected by Storm Bert, it was much more natural causes for power outages and so forth this weekend that required stocking up. But I think that sort of, major hard physical infrastructure like power grids, like water. We can't ignore the threat, but it would be such a major escalation. It's technically quite hard to do, and there hasn't been any sign of it. I think we're not really in that space. The space we're in for everyday purposes at this moment in time, I think people should and businesses should undertake cybersecurity improvements, because it's more when your basic Windows operating systems and stuff like that doesn't work. And then your school perhaps can't pay invoices, and maybe it can't pay staff, and your hospital can't process appointments, and businesses can't pay invoices. And that's the sort of routine pain we've been in, mostly from criminals, but those criminals are based in and harboured by the Russian state, and sometimes by the state itself. So it's probably not threat to life or threat to the absolute foundational building blocks of life, but there's a lot of irritation, a lot of economic and social disruption that we can and do face every day in cyberspace, but we can do something about it.